The biggest mistake I made in my business was not hiring a professional to help me with my money. Not just my taxes, but the actual plan I had for my business. I was completely lost on how to handle taxes, what to do with profit, and how to maintain my income. I had to find a better way. That's when I found Core Financial. Core Financial is a team of tax professionals that actually care about building real relationships with their clients. They run my books, keep me up to date with my finances, and make sure I'm taking full advantage of all of my tax benefits. Are you struggling with your finances? Look no further. Core Financial is a brand that is nationwide that can help you with your business. Both Nick and I are huge fans of Core, and they can help you too. Check out howtofilmweddings.com/core to schedule a consultation today. Core Financial, real relationships, no surprises.
That's me warming up.
I'm just warming up too.
Okay, Blake, you feel free to use that one.
Aha! I knew there was a spider. That's why I keep getting all these freaking bites. Suck.
That's why John now has a nubbin.
Look!
Over here.
Look at the bite. Look at that bite. That's right.
And he's covering up his nipple right now because this is a PG show.
Hello and welcome to the How to Film Weddings podcast. My name is John Bunn. It's a good day because we have a new podcast and I'm joined by my best good buddy, Nick Miller. Nick the Beard, how are you doing? What's good in your world, my friend?
I just realized that the people listening can't see me waving at you. And I was waving for a good 30 seconds, but I'm doing really well. It's a little rainy here in the Wichita, so it's a little cooler outside. Really humid, but it's cooler. So I don't know, but things are well in my world. Things are good in my world. We're getting new windows next week in our bedroom. No, I mean, it's cool because we need them, but windows are not cheap, my friends. So if you ever need to buy windows,
save up.
You got to save up. So
this is good. I like this. This really, pours us into the content for today. I'm trying to think of a segue from Windows. I don't know
if there is a good segue. Oh, we are going to show you through our window how we shoot weddings.
That is exactly right. And Nick, so today
we're doing
interesting.
Something.
It's interesting. We have a podcast and you're listening to it.
We do.
Of course. It is called How to Film Weddings.
It is called How to Film Weddings. That is correct.
We spend a lot of time talking about how to build a wedding film business, but we don't spend a ton of time talking about how to film weddings. So, Nick and
That's very ironic.
I know. We get kind of some crap online every now and then. It's like, you're not teaching us how to film weddings. You're teaching us how to sell weddings. So we wanted to have a few episodes kind of just breaking down how we film weddings. And we know that some of you are getting back into weddings with the fall or just getting kind of ready for next year's weddings. And so we wanted to do a few episodes just talking about how we shoot different parts of the day. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about how each of us shoot wedding ceremonies. And so that's the topic for today. And I'm really excited to break it down in our Complete Wedding Videography course, which is coming back soon. That's all I'm going to say about that. We go in depth, of course, about how to shoot a wedding. Yes. In that course itself, we go through every single aspect of the day. But on the podcast, we've never really done that. And so one of the main parts of a ceremony or parts of a wedding day is the ceremony. And we thought we'd start there with talking about how Nick and I both shoot, what kind of camera bodies, the settings we use. Hopefully, if you feel like you got ceremonies on lockdown, you pick up a few nuggets from how we're doing this.
Yeah.
And on these episodes, we would love a little bit more in the comments about kind of what you do, how many camera bodies, the kinds of lenses you use. We really want to have a conversation around this topic. So, Nick, without further ado, I say let's get into it.
Yeah, so let's break it down and talk about how we shoot wedding ceremonies. We're going to break it down. Wiki. Did you know that John likes to beatbox? Most of the time, whenever we have a guest on, before we hit record, he's like, just like that.
Yes, that's
just
true.
like that. Anyways, so we're going to break it down right now. When it comes to the wedding ceremony, the first thing, we shoot all of our wedding ceremonies with 3 camera bodies. So
Before you go into that, I don't mean to cut you off. You say we, and it's not we. So I just want to make, Nick's going to talk about what he does. I'm going to talk about what I do.
Yes.
There you go.
When
I just didn't want
say
people to think we do.
Talking about filming the ceremony, I mean my wife Jen and I, Wild Oak Films. So when Jen and I shoot a wedding, we have 3 camera bodies. We have the one that she has, the one that I have, and then we have our gimbal / aisle cam. Do we go ahead? Do you want me to go ahead and talk about where do you want me to go there? I mean, do you just?
I think we'll break it down: number of camera bodies, number of shooters, all the stuff. You tell kind of what you do, then I'll say what I do.
Okay.
And that sort of a thing.
Okay.
Because I've never shot a wedding with you. You've shot one with me. But I'm interested to know how
I
you
do it the correct way.
Sure. Yeah. And I do it incorrectly. Yes.
I didn't say that. I just said I do it the correct way. But when I shoot weddings with you, I'm there. So maybe it's also the correct. I'm sorry. I'm trying to be funny, and it's not.
It's
working.
not landing. No,
it's not landing. So okay. So we have 3 camera bodies. How we go about the ceremony is currently, as of recording this, we are shooting on the Canon C100 Mark IIs. Future cameras to be determined because everything is being released right now and all of it's catching on fire apparently. So who knows what we're going to be using in the future, but we have 3 C100 Mark II camera bodies. Jen is our up the aisle shooter. So she is getting all of the people coming down the aisle. C100 does have a fantastic autofocus system. So she's able to do that sometimes. So she's not pulling focus the entire time, but she captures that one. And then my camera during the processional is actually unmanned on a tripod. I leave that off to the side as close to front as I can get so that whenever people stand up, they are not in the shot. And then I will have it right on the groom as soon as he gets in position. And I usually talk to him beforehand and let him know whenever you get to where you are supposed to be at the front, stand there and don't move. Because I am not manning that camera. I have it right on his. I get it as tight as I can. Both of us are typically on 70 to 200, the 2.8. If the aisle isn't super long, Jen will use a 50 millimeter for people coming down, but most of the time she's on a 70 to 200. And then on my Ronin, I have that, and I'm following people in, kind of walking up the side, but I really like to get the bride, the back of her as she's coming down the aisle. And on that one, I have the Sigma 18 to 35 1.8 to get a kind of a nicer, wider shot of her coming down the aisle. So that's how we do the processional. Do you want me to keep going? Or
no, I just wanted you to tell me how many camera bodies you use, so I'm ready.
You told me to cover all of it. You were like, go over all of this stuff. That's what you just said. Listeners, isn't that what he just said?
I don't think I did. I think I said you could do camera bodies, I'll do camera bodies. But I like how you did it. I was interested. I was picking up what you were putting down. I liked it. I mean, at this point,
okay, you talk now.
Whatever.
You talk.
Yeah,
it's your turn. It's your turn.
Well, I appreciate that.
Okay.
So, number of camera bodies for a ceremony for me, I will do 3 or 4, depending. The camera systems that I'm on, I have 2 C100 Mark IIs, and then I have 2 of the original OG C100 Mark Is. I only use those for the ceremony. And I put I have 2 shooters, myself, and I have lots of different people that I use for a second shooter. My wife does not shoot with me. I've got like 7 people that have shot 100 or more weddings with me at this point. And so I have 2 main guys, Brandon and Joel, and then I have some more people that I use if they're not available. But for 2020, one of those 2 are at every wedding with me. Camera 1 is similar to what Nick said Jen does. That's the person at the front of the aisle, shooting during the processional, kind of up the aisle on usually a 50. This is going to be not at, and we'll talk about aperture and things like that in a little bit, but it's a 51.2. We don't shoot it at 1.2 typically for the ceremony. That's camera 1, shooting people walking down the aisle from the front, a little off to the right if you're looking at things. I think Nick does front to the left.
We do. If you're looking at the stage or stage.
Yeah. So if you're looking at the stage, I have my number one camera. Camera one is kind of off and to the right for a while until somewhere around the idea when like the ring bearer and flower girl come in. That's whenever, if I'm doing that camera, I will scoot to the aisle itself and get down really low and shoot straight up the aisle. Camera two is the groom camera. That one is usually a C100 Mark I, and I put it at the front like Nick, very similar on a 70 to 200. I put it in front of everybody, so when people stand up, I don't really ever tell the groom not to move, which I should do, so I appreciate that. I'll do that. But I kind of do a profile and make sure that the camera number one is not in the shot. And so camera person number two will get that in focus and make sure that the groom is where he needs to be on a 70 to 200. We usually leave it somewhere around 100, 120. We don't go super tight in case he scoots up a little bit. And that angle is usually no more open than like a 4.0 to 5.6 because we don't want him to scoot in and out of frame because it's going to be unmanned very soon. Camera three is a long lens down the aisle, and I'll put that during the processional at the back right, so it's not in my camera one person's shot. And that's on a 135 typically, and that's going to be just an oh crap angle. I usually don't use it until the ceremony gets going, but it's there in case somebody stands up in front of the groom from my groom angle. Sometimes it saves my butt. And then the last camera is my gimbal camera, a C100 Mark II, which is the fourth camera, and that is similar to what Nick does following in. I'm usually on that camera and getting big wide swooping shots of people like coming down the aisle and from the side and making sure I'm not in camera one in the way there. And kind of sometimes I'll follow down the side of the entire ceremony while people were walking in just to give myself different looks. And then once the bride comes in, I kind of start from the back and like swoop myself around, get like a top to bottom kind of shot and follow in from behind her. And then once she gets up to the front, I set that down in the middle of the aisle. So that's on a 16 to 35, the long lens 135, and then a couple of 70 to 200s, 4 cameras. And then we do a couple other things once the ceremony gets going, but that is kind of the basic breakdown for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So where do we go from here? Like after,
I say maybe we talk through, what happens once the ceremony gets going.
Yeah.
What you guys do.
Yeah. So, okay. So we do all of our stuff as you're looking at the front, of this, we do everything on the left side as you're looking at her. So Jen has her camera up the aisle. She's on the left of that. I put my groom reaction shot on the left side, and then I have my gimbal and I stick to the left side as well, following everybody in doing that. For the gimbal camera, because I want to, especially on a longer aisle, I want to try to give both my wife and the photographer a clean shot where I am not in it. So I usually walk down the aisle maybe like a fourth or a third of the way down, depending on how long it is. And then I get back as soon as I can so that for at least a little bit, they can have a shot of the bride with her dad without me in it. And then as soon as I see my wife, whenever the bride gets about pretty close, probably, she's got about a fourth of the way to go, she actually pulls off and kind of goes and stands by my unmanned groom camera, and she is filming. And during that, I run up the middle of the aisle and I place my Ronin gimbal camera on the ground, put the feet out, put it on the ground, and I make that pretty wide. It's 18 to 35 lens, so I'm usually shooting somewhere between 18 and 24 with that one. And then after I get that one in place, then I will go back, run up and grab my camera. I have her tripod set up. She's usually on the monopod up front. Forgot to mention that earlier. I will grab my tripod camera and I will run around because I'm usually shooting the bride side, she's shooting the groom side. And then she takes her camera off of the monopod, puts it on the tripod, and then that's where we stick for the entire ceremony. 270 to 200s on the side, and then the wider gimbal camera on the ground right up the middle. So What about you?
Similar but different. I if you're looking at the stage, my camera one will be at the front right. And I know that like the 180 rule, if you're not both on the same side, I just personally like the look of it better where it's at on the front right. That's just me. But that camera, like as the bride is getting close to being at the front, my lead shooter is on a monopod at the front. He will scoot back and out of the way, and get kind of like the dad's reaction as he's handing her away from up front, and get that shot before moving to a tripod that's set up on the right hand side that will take the camera off the monopod and lock it down and change out the lens from a 50 to a 70 to 200. And so that, like, as my job as the person coming down the aisle with the gimbal, again, I'm also trying to give the photographer time with a good shot. I'm staying low behind the bride, following her in. I'm usually like 10, 15 feet behind her. I don't get too close. I don't want to take a chance.
Same.
I just want a little bit of that movement. Seeing people, and I love that shot. That's one of the main reasons I have a gimbal. And, I just walk, 3/4 of the way down the aisle, sit my Ronin down on the aisle, put it at 16 to 20, somewhere in there, like what you said. The autofocus on. I just want like a wide, safe shot that's on the ground. And at that point, I'll set my gimbal down and I'll walk over to where the long lens was off to the back to the right, and then I'll move that back to. I knocked my microphone. The camera that's off to the back to the right, I'll grab it and put it in the back middle of the aisle on a 135. So this is like a safe, straight angle of the officiant's face. The compression on the 135 is great. It looks really nice. So then I end up having a 70 to 200 on each side, matching a 135 down the aisle, and then a gimbal that's like 20 feet in front of that on the ground, not in the frame. So I get a wide, a tight, and then two tight, longer angles for the ceremony. And then I don't touch them. Like I literally just leave them alone. And so that's kind of the basic portion. Is there anything else to add about that?
No, I don't think so. And then, recessional, I'm leaving, our cameras on the sides, I'm leaving them in place. Usually Jen will stay in tight for the kiss. I will actually zoom mine out kind of wider on the 70 to 200, just in case they move or something happens. Then I'm running back and getting the gimbal camera. As soon as they kiss and they start coming up, I will stand up and then just walk backwards, with it.
Yeah. During the ceremony, a couple of things that I do that are a little different. So my camera one, which is the bride angle, it's on the right. Whenever there's something happening that doesn't involve the bride, that's usually when, for a couple of minutes during the ceremony, I'll have my other shooter get some reaction shots of parents. I will have them turn that camera from bride, find the parents in the front row. That's kind of a hint, usually people in the front row. But I'll just lock the camera down on them for 5 or 10 seconds. And I'm always just kind of keeping an eye on the parents, just in case they're crying or something. And then my other camera, which is the groom angle, will do the same. We're just kind of looking at the front of the aisle, just seeing if anybody's crying, any kind of reaction.
Yeah.
And so that's happening. My gimbal in the middle is just staying wide the whole ceremony, that long lens. After they've done the rings and the vows, I'll take that camera that was in the center on the 135 and I'll scoot it off to the right so that when the couple kisses, they're not going to walk through it. And then I will grab the gimbal and stand next to the photographer. And beforehand, I will always make sure to say, hey, during the kiss, I'm going to be on the gimbal in the middle of the aisle and I'll stand right next to you. And we can just back up together. And that way we're not in each other's shot. And so that gives me a long angle of the kiss from the back, the groom side, and then that's like a non-manned angle of the kiss. And I will have the person up front, my second shooter, after the kiss happens, whip really fast and get people clapping and different things like that. And so that way I just have a different look for all that part of the ceremony. And that's, standard, depending on if there's not room for me to have a fourth camera, I'll change that up. But that is the basics of how I shoot a ceremony. And I will say it, if you're listening, I don't try to do anything super fancy. I try to make it to where it's kind of the meat of the day. I'm not trying to do anything fancy. I just want to get really good audio, really clean video, and not moving, shaking footage. So that's always something I can come back to. It's home in my edit. And so I just want to cover myself, make sure I have safe a safe angle all the time rolling, and I record the entire thing the whole time. I don't stop the camera. And that's how we have found over the years to do the best for us for what we're wanting for our edit.
Yep. And yeah, I don't do a lot of the reaction stuff. That's always something that I think that I should do. So that's probably something that I might take away from this. And then we mentioned it before, but I'll go over it really quickly. We are using two 70-200s, the 2.8s. We have a version 2 and a version 3 of those, the Canon ones, and then the Sigma 18-35 is on the gimbal. We'll get into kind of where we set the apertures and all that kind of stuff. And then John said he has the 2.8s, the 135, and then the 16-35 on his gimbal camera. So that's kind of the setup and how we go through the ceremony. Here in a second, we're getting ready to go to a break. Whenever we get back, we're going to talk about kind of our lens setting and also frame rates and audio stuff. So you're going to want to check that out, and we will cover that as soon as we get back from this break. What would you take on if you had an extra set of hands? What would you do with your free time if you didn't have to edit? So many of us get bogged down in the post-production hustle that we never seem time to focus on our business. John and I both felt that way until we found Wedditor. Wedditor is a post-production team of top wedding film editors and project managers that give your films and brand the extra eyes, ears, and hands that they need. Not only is Wedditor delivering films we love to our couples faster, but we can invest ourselves fully in other areas of our business knowing that Wedditor has our back. Be the first to know how your second shooters are doing, how those new LUTs work with your footage, and relax knowing your couples are getting the full attention they deserve on every single project. So what could you do with an extra hand? Head over to howtofilmweddings.com/Wedditor, whether you're ready to start now or preparing for next season. Be sure to use promo code HTFW for $50 off your first project. If you're interested in this service, make sure you head over to howtofilmweddings.com/Wedditor soon. Fall 2020 spots are lined up and filling up fast. Wedditor, more than freelance, more than outsourcing. And we are back from break, and we're going to go ahead and jump into our question of the day presented by Wedditor. Wedditor, more than freelance, more than outsourcing. It's howtofilmweddings.com/Wedditor. If you would like to hire them to edit your wedding films. John, our question of the day is this. Why are you using the lenses that you are using for your ceremonies? Why those ones?
Yeah. So the lens choices are very intentional. Mm-hmm. And if you're a solo shooter, if you're shooting with a team, I think the most important thing is to match different angles with each other and for it to make sense when telling the story. And so the reason that I'm using the same lens for my groom and bride angle is I want those to basically be mirror images of each other. So whenever I cut between bride talking and groom talking, it makes sense. If I was on a 24 millimeter for my groom angle and a 200 for my bride angle, it'd be like it wouldn't cut together the right way. You wouldn't feel the same emotion. And so it doesn't mean you have to go out and buy two 70-200s because that's what Nick and I both use. But like maybe you have a 135 and a 100 or something, or if you have something that's just kind of, you want it to get close. You want it to be similar. And so yes. Why are we using the lenses that we're using? They help me tell the story the way I want to tell it. I want a wide lens for my gimbal because I want to show off the whole wedding party, and I want to show off a big wide shot of the room. I have a long shot straight down, 135 down the aisle because I want to be able to, it's around the same focal length of what I'm putting my bride and groom angle at, so I can cut nicely between all of the angles. What do you have for that? Anything to add?
No, I don't have anything to add. But like if you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, I have a 35 and a 50, and those are my only two lenses, and I want to match the angles. Well, if you're using primes, what you would just need to do is have the 35 be closer than your 50. Try to do that and frame as best as you can. One of the reasons why we love the 70-200, especially for ceremonies, is we don't want to be obtrusive. And so we want to be as far away as we can with still getting the shot that we need. And so with the 70-200, we can back up a little bit further and then zoom in to get those shots that we want. So that's why we are picking those ones. So and along the same lines, why are we the lenses that we're picking and we're using that. Aperture is another thing that I think that we should touch on, and just because like John said earlier, he has the Canon 50 1.2. Just because it can go to 1.2, should you be shooting 1.2? And the answer is no. You shouldn't be shooting 1.2,
especially you're really good at pulling focus.
Unless you're really good at pulling focus. But even then, it's just too shallow. For our ceremonies, the lowest that I go on ceremony cams is 2.8. And most of the time, I'm keeping my 70 to 200s on 2.8 because I need more light to shoot with those, and that's the lowest that they can go. So I don't want to bump that up. And 2.8 is pretty good, for keeping focus. It's not super shallow, so you can keep it in focus. And then with a gimbal camera, I'm putting that anywhere from a 2.8 to a 3.5, just so I can keep stuff in focus as everything is moving and going on. But you don't really want it to be super, super shallow for the ceremony. And especially from a watching standpoint, stuff that is really, really shallow can be a little disorienting if you're shooting on, for instance, with a 1.2 on your 50, that means that your eyes can be in focus, but your nose will be out of focus. That's how shallow that is. So you want to have a little bit more. We recommend somewhere between a 2.8 to a 4.0 or a 5.6, somewhere in there, just so that everything stays in focus and it's not real, disorienting. What do you have to add about that?
Yeah, on the aperture, for those of you, most of you out there know, but basically the lower that number, 1.2, it's a much wider open lens. There's a lot more light getting in. That's great. It causes the depth of field, what's in focus, to be, shallower. Less stuff is in focus. Your nose is in focus. Your eyes are out of focus or whatever. And so the higher you make that number, the more stuff's in focus. Mm-hmm. So if you're at an F12, everything's going to be in focus. It's going to be super sharp, but not a lot of light's going to get in. And so there's, most of you know that kind of thing. But I think the thing that I did at the beginning is I just thought, I got to get that number lower so I could get more light in, because that's what matters. And so I would try to shoot ceremonies at 1.4 on a 50, just having a hard time keeping everything in focus, or the groom's in focus, but the bride's out of focus. Mm-hmm. And so now with cameras and whatever, but it's much easier to have, your camera at a 2.8 and higher. On my gimbal, I usually... I want to say that I should be shooting at 4.0. I would recommend 4.0, but I'm usually at somewhere between a 2.8. I forget to switch it, but with the autofocus for for C100 Mark IIs, it's a little different. But 4.0 for a wide angle, to me, 4.0 to 5.6, you just want that to be a little bit more crisp. The bride and groom angles, I love having those at 2.8. I just feel like that's a great compression. Mm-hmm. And then on my 135 during the ceremony, once I get it locked, because I'm far away at 2.0, it actually has a pretty good depth of field. Everybody's in focus. And that's just kind of what you want to look for, is do you want everybody to be in focus? Do you not want everybody? It's stylistically your choice. Is there enough light in the room to stop down and have it, be less of the shallow depth look? So there's different factors in it. Sometimes I'm in a ceremony and I don't want to bring in lights and it's really dark and I have to bump my ISO and I have to shoot a little bit more open than I want to. So I have to just be more careful. So the more wide open you are, the harder it is to stay in focus. The less wide open, that kind of thing. And so I'm trying to usually match those all around 2.8. I wouldn't recommend anything lower than a 2.0 during a ceremony.
Yeah. And, think of it this way. If you're not accustomed to this sort of thing, when you're watching television or movies, they shoot stuff, with higher apertures. If you're watching it, it's most of the stuff is pretty in focus, unless it's very stylistic, a choice not to. But a high percentage of shots, most everything is in focus or really well in focus. So that means that they're shooting with a higher aperture, a more closed aperture. So that's just something to keep in mind, especially for this doc, kind of style stuff where people want to see everything. So we talked about aperture. Let's talk a little bit about frame rates. Most people are either shooting in, there's three three real frame rates, right, that people use for our cameras. It's going to be 24 frames per second, 24p, 30 frames per second, 30p, or 60p, 60 frames per second. Basically, if you're in real time, 30 and 60 are the exact same thing. It's if you want to slow them down, that 60 is a little bit different. I know kind of the rule is to shoot at 24 frames per second for live action kind of stuff that you're not going to slow down. However, I shoot my entire day in 60 frames per second. I shoot everything in 60 frames per second. One of the things with the C100, I know some people get away from that because the file sizes are bigger, but even on the C100 shooting the entire day at 60 frames per second, the file sizes, an entire wedding for me is like 80 gigabytes. And that's with 3 cameras and full ceremonies and all that kind of stuff. So that frame size or the file size doesn't matter much to me. And I have shot enough weddings where I wanted it to be in 24, but one of our cameras forgot to switch it. And so we had 2 cameras that were 24 and one was at 60. So I'm like, hey, we're shooting most of the day at 60, so let's just leave it at that. And that's just how we operate. My brides don't care. I still drop it in a 24 frames per second timeline and edit it that way. So I shoot the entire day in 60, including ceremony. John?
First of all, I know that like in Europe or different places besides the US, 25.
That's true.
50, like there's that sort of thing.
It's
I don't know anything about that. But
you're
PAL, NTSC.
pretty much everywhere but the United States, I think, is PAL, and we're NTSC.
Yeah. So we're just like the weird, as always. So
yeah.
When I went to Europe and I was like, wait a second, this doesn't look right. The lights are weird and all that. I had to change a bunch of stuff on my camera. So but for what it's worth, the point, I guess, of the frame rate for the ceremony itself, like if you're wanting to get a slow motion shot of the bride coming down the aisle, without having to go in and do a lot of work, shooting at a higher frame rate is going to be a better option for you if you want to slow down the gimbal angle, things like that. I've recently switched to 24p for my ceremonies. I was just speeding every one of them up, never using any of that slow motion. Like I've really shied away from doing slow motion except for using 60 frames for detail shots of the reception just to give myself a little bit of buffer. And then I shoot the bride and groom, the portrait session, stuff like that, because I like to slow some of that down. But the rest of the day, it's mainly, regular speed. I do shoot the whole day in 60p minus any part like live event type things. So I'll switch over my cameras to 24. During the ceremony, I'm at 24 frames a second. I just like the way that it looks better for me. I know that I can smooth it out a little bit if I want to, but I had gone over a year without slowing down anything in a ceremony, and I was like, this is, and because I have C100 Mark 1s and Mark 2s, the C100 Mark 1s only shoot 24. They don't shoot 60, so I was like mixing 60p and 24p, and I was just like, nah, I just want to shoot this at 24 frames a second. So for that and for speeches, I will switch the cameras over to 24p. It makes the file sizes smaller, but I really don't care at this point. I know that with the R5 or with the A7S III, 24 frames a second overheating. The C100 is still to me just like a crazy beast of a wedding day camera. 24p on the frame rates. Next up on the list for ceremonies, a big topic is audio and capturing audio correctly. When I started shooting weddings, you had to buy crappy wireless packs. You couldn't monitor them. You couldn't really tell. In almost every wedding, the audio would be trash. Something would happen, and a lot has changed. And so I know that for me, audio is so super important. I know it is for you. So why don't you break down the kinds of things you're thinking about for audio and just the whole process for you for audio for a ceremony?
Yeah. So when it comes to ceremony audio, I mic everything as if I have no board to plug into. So everyone that can have a mic does have a mic, especially Catholic ceremonies. They typically, it's really, really hard to plug into their sound systems. At least the ones here in Wichita. And I think it's, they have their sound systems. Someone gets it set up for them and they just make it so they push a button and turn it on and then it's good to go. Like it's not in a place where you can typically plug in. So especially for Catholic ceremonies, I don't even bother. I don't even try. So for us, we put a mic on our bride, put a mic on the groom, we put a mic on the officiant. If there is some sort of podium that people are going to be speaking at, I will put a DR10L. I'll like wrap it around, the mic stand, that's on there. So and attach it on there. At every wedding, I have 5 DR10Ls with me. So I'm able to mic up multiple things. I'm not saying if you're listening to this and you're new, you need to go and spend $1,000 to go get 5 DR10Ls. I'm not saying that, but the more that you have, the more freedom that you will have. This past wedding that I was actually shooting this last weekend, I was glad that I had that 5th one because I had the podium mic'd up. I had the bride, the groom. No, the bride wasn't wearing one. Her dress couldn't do it. But the groom had his mic, and then there were 2 officiants. So they both wore lapel mics. And then I have a field recorder that just captures the ambient noise. And I recently got the Zoom F6, and that's the one that I plug into board audio. I use my H4n. That one is now kind of my ambient mic that I will typically, put near, if there's musicians or, a quartet, piano, something like that. If they don't have that kind of thing, I try to put it close to a speaker that everything is piping through just as a backup. Typically not using that one, but, if you need it, you need it. And then if I am able to plug into board, I'm using my Zoom F6 to get a feed from the DJ or from the church to plug into that. Did I cover everything that I needed to? I think so.
I think so. I can add just a couple of my 2 cents. I've never mic'd a bride, and I always keep telling myself I want to. My workaround for this has been to mic the father of the bride when they're walking down the aisle, to be able to hear, or whoever's walking her down the aisle, I'll try to mic them. I have mainly males, and I know that I can have bridesmaids help me. I just haven't seen the benefit quite yet. I should, but I don't. But that's just me for right now. But so I mic up the groom. I mic up the officiant or officiants. I put a mic on the podium or like lay one over a speaker just as a backup. These are all on Tascam DR10Ls. Mm-hmm. Just unreal microphone quality. I use the mics that come with it. I haven't bought any extras. Sounds great. I know, Nick, I think you bought extra nice ones for yours, maybe?
Yeah, for my bride mic and my groom mic, I have a Countryman B3.
Yeah. And so like I've watched videos and listened to different, and there is a difference. It just wasn't enough for the investment for me. And I just haven't, I don't know. It's fine. I should, but I haven't. But miking the father of the bride as he's walking her down the aisle, that gives me like audio of her if she says something, or if like right beforehand. I think it's really sweet to have, like, as a dad, like I like the idea of having audio of dad and bride like right before the ceremony. You can hear them talking, and sometimes that's really good stuff. So the main thing I think to be thinking about when it comes to audio is you don't want to rely on one source. I would recommend 3 sources of audio at the least. And worst case scenario, if you don't have the $600 or so to buy 3 Tascam DR10Ls or something, would be to rent a few of them. I know you can rent them for super cheap. And like if you're going to spend money on anything, getting good audio during the ceremony is going to be really, really, really important. The way that we place the microphones, I know Nick puts the mic under the collar of the groom. I always put my microphone right under the boutonniere of the groom, just on the lapel. And then go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, if the bride is mic'd, then I will put it in the collar for the groom. If the bride is not mic'd, I put it on the lapel, so it's easier for her voice to be picked up in his mic.
Yeah, and that's why I don't put it under the collars, because I'm relying on the officiant and the groom's mic to cover the bride's mic. I've heard Nick's audio of the bride talk. It sounds so much better if the bride is mic'd. Like, it's so much easier to get a clean feed. So that's the main reason why I'm just like, I really need to do that. But I haven't had major issues yet because I've had multiple ways to get audio. It's not as good as it could be maybe, but it's still sounds great. So, and then I do bring a Zoom H4 in as well, and I'll plug into the board of a band or a DJ or the house system or whatever. And if they don't have that available to me, I will put it like right up against the speaker and do some ambient. I don't have a dedicated just ambient audio one like you do. Mine's mainly just
I only have a dedicated ambient one because I upgraded my field recorder. Like I did. I don't necessarily think that an ambient one is 100% necessary, but I have it and I might as well use it because I have it.
Yeah. So. And the microphones on the top of the C100s do a really good job of picking up ambient noise for me if I want to use for like the ceremony edit, things like that. I typically will, when I'm going to mic up the officiant or the groom, I will prep them a little bit and just say, hey, this is recording. You guys are paying me way too much. I'm not going to use anything that makes you sound bad, so don't worry about it, but just don't touch it. If you touch it, I can't guarantee it's going to sound good. Will you say that for me on the microphone that you heard me say that, and like kind of goof with them or whatever. I never ask them if I can put it on. That is a thing that I think a lot of us do. Do you mind if I put this on you? Don't do that. Just say, hey, I'm about to put this on you.
Because what if they say, yeah, I don't want to?
Yeah. So
that's why
definitely
you don't
just the officiant, some of these Catholic weddings I've done, the priest, it's like, no, I'm not wearing that. Instead of walking up, introducing yourself, being kind and saying, hey, I'd like to I'm going to go ahead and put the mic on you for the video. The bride and groom have asked for me to make sure have specifically asked me to make sure I have you. And if they say, no, I'm not going to do it, I'm recording the whole time. So I have the officiant say, no, I'm not going to wear that. That's only happened a few times, but it does happen. If that does happen, that's why I have extra Taz cams to kind of set them up around where he would be talking. And so, if they're going to have a podium or if it's an outdoor ceremony and they're going to have somebody read scriptures, I always tape on a Taz cam wherever and always plug into a board and always just have multiple sources of audio.
Yeah. So
that's the aperture, that's the frame rate, that's the audio. Got a couple more things to talk about, but we're going to do that after this break.
Are you tired of just sending a link to your couples when you are done with their film? Do you want to deliver something they can actually see and feel? Something physical? We are so excited to tell you about Photo Flash Drive. Photo Flash Drive's customizable hard drive and solid state drives give your client a peace of mind. Take your delivery experience to the next level with your couples. Photo Flash Drive uses state-of-the-art Seagate drives that are 100% customizable. PFD has the ability to print your logo, your couple's names, or both on the drive. You guys, we picked up a few of these and they are so good. We cannot wait to blow our clients away with this next level physical product. Not only can you customize these drives, Photo Flash Drive offers high quality, customizable boxes that you can brand with your logo to really blow your couples away. My favorite is the rustic slide box that has our logo engraved on the cover. Having a high quality product like this is something that has been definitely lacking in my business. The custom hard drives and solid state drives with cases are a great way to sell additional items to your couple, a great way to offer a full branding experience, and a great way to leave an impression. And today we have a deal for you. Use promo code HTFW15 for 15% off all hard drives, solid state drives, and cases. Head over to howtofilmweddings.com/photoflashdrive to see all the details.
Finding the perfect song for your wedding film can be so frustrating. We spend countless hours searching for the perfect song. When it comes to licensing music, Nick and I both love MusicBed. Not only do they have the best music, but their website makes it so easy to find the perfect song and to find it fast. We have both been using the MusicBed's wedding subscription for years and cannot recommend it enough. Not only are they adding new music from incredible musicians like Chapters, The Light, The Heat, and Tony Anderson all the time, they've made it incredibly easy to search their library for mood, genre, instrumentation, and even key. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to howtofilmweddings.com/musicbed and use promo code HTFW for a free month of a MusicBed wedding subscription. howtofilmweddings.com/musicbed. And we are back from break. And we are breaking it all down for you, how we shoot wedding ceremonies. We've gone through the lens choices, how many shooters. We've talked about why we're using what lenses, the aperture, the frame rate, audio. Nick, I want to get to, strategy at this point. Strategy for capturing a live event. What are some tips? Like, what is your strategy going into a wedding ceremony? What's going through your head? What's going through Jen's head? Do you guys talk beforehand? What kind of strategy do you guys have?
The biggest strategy thing that I think I can talk to you about is going to be, first off, communicate with especially the photographer before you get anything started. Let them know. Have your game plan. Have your game plan. Obviously, there are things that Jen and I like to do, and we've shot close to 200 weddings together, so we know exactly what we want to do on our ceremonies. But the photographer, if we've never worked with them, you need to communicate with them. Also, before the ceremony, especially if it's in a church, at some church building, communicate with either the officiant or the priest, and just kind of ask them where you should go, where you should be. If any of you have been banished to the balcony, okay? If any of you have been banished to the balcony, it was because someone did not listen to the rules that the priest or officiant or whoever wanted you to have. So if a priest gives you a rule, an officiant gives you a rule, and you break it, guess what? The person that shoots the wedding there after you, they might be banished to the balcony, and it's your fault. So follow the rules that they give you so that you are a good and decent person and you help out fellow wedding videographers and photographers in your industry. So communicate ahead of a time, make sure everything is good to go there. As far as strategy for filming, the first piece of advice that we have would be to keep it simple. Okay, don't try to do too much, especially if you've never shot a wedding before. If you are just getting into this and you don't really know what's going on, keep it simple, okay? I think that Jen and I had been shooting quite a while before we put her at the front, getting that angle of the bride coming down the aisle. We would, back when I had a slider, I would just put the slider on the ground and then face it backing up and have Jen stand there and get her in focus where I wanted the bride to be in focus. And that would be my aisle coming down cam, was this really low up, wide, terrible looking shot. But that's what I was comfortable with. And I could have that there, then move it to the middle and turn it around. So we kept it really simple. I wouldn't recommend doing a bunch of gimbal, especially if you want to give them the whole ceremony. Don't do a bunch of gimbal movements. Don't do a bunch of movement stuffs until you are comfortable with filming ceremony. So keep it simple. Don't try to do too much. What do you have to add?
Well, when thinking about the strategy of how to make a ceremony, I am thinking how to keep it simple. I'm trying to think, I just need this to be solid first. I'm not trying to get super duper creative. Like, I'm not trying to just do something crazy I've never done before. This is the main course. This is the part of the day that I just want to get done and record solid. And then I can always add pretty stuff on top of it. Some of the strategy that I'm thinking about is I just want to have one wide angle that's safe pretty much the whole time that's recording, that can be a ceremony angle that I know that I can always cut back to if I need to. I don't sell the ceremony to most couples up front. I do it afterwards. And so I record the whole ceremony, and I always have at least one angle that I know that if cameras are moving, that angle can be cut back to. But strategy, when like what you said with the photographer, is really important, especially if I haven't worked with them before. I just make them know, I take them aside 10, 15 minutes before the ceremony and say, what's the most important portions? Where do you want to make sure you can be? Where do you want to make sure, I'll work around that. I want to make sure you're able to get what you want. And I'll tell you in a sec, kind of the things that are the most important to me. And so they'll say, because every photographer is different. We like to be here. We like to do this. And I'll say, these are where my cameras are. This is what my intention is. This is what my plan is. Is that going to be in your way? I can move things out of the way. I typically have my second shooter here. We'll get out of the way. I'll typically follow in and just kind of walk through what we do and say, I'll say things like, we have photography in our company as well. If Nina's not shooting with me, I'll say, we're very aware of photographers. We'll make sure we're not in your shot. And then I say, the most important things to me are the groom's face whenever she's coming down the aisle. I want to see her face when she's coming down the aisle, and I want to have a good angle of the kiss. Other than that, like I've got 4 cameras rolling. If I can't capture it, I suck at my job. And I kind of make it lighthearted like that instead of coming like right at them and be like, where are you going to go? This is what I need. It's more of a relationship building with them, taking care of them first, just letting them know you care will go a long way. I've had photographers from Hades that are just the worst, that would not help, that would just get in the way. And it's like, there's only so much you can do with someone like that. But most people are pretty cool and pretty legit. And then like what Nick is saying, strategy when it comes to the venue itself, just making sure that you're not overstepping your bounds on where your cameras can be. You're respecting the church, or some of the different churches you go to have really strict rules. And to me, at a certain point, I'm always super kind, and I'm like, hey, I'd really love it if I could be right here. Is that possible? If they say no, I say, okay, like it's in my contract, like all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. I was glad you brought up that contract point. That's what I was thinking. We have a clause in our contract that says that we are bound by the venue's rules. And so, there was one place we were shooting at where the church lady would not let us have an up the aisle shot. She said, nope, nope. And it stinks, but like that's a part of our contract. And so even when the couple didn't like it, I said, that's what she told me. And you signed this contract. Like, don't present it that way. But obviously, that's something that you really need to think about and consider. I wanted to touch really quick on, if you go to wedding video forums, if you go to photographer forums, especially on Facebooks and groups and stuff, you have so many people that are always complaining, oh, the photo people got in my way. Oh, the video people got in my way. Okay. This is why, if you're doing a ceremony edit, you need to have at least 2 cameras. You really should have at least 2 cameras. And if I only had 2 cameras, what I would do is I would have, during the ceremony, I would have one shooting straight up the middle, as tight as it could be. And then I would get one probably off to the back left, behind the seats, as high as possible. So if that photographer decides to walk down and stand right in the middle of the aisle while the rings are going on or while the kiss is going on or something like that, I do have a safe, wide, high angle shot that I could cut to where you could still see that. Okay. One of the reasons we have 3 cameras is so that we can cut between those 3 cameras. And if you are doing your job, very, very rarely am I going to have one photographer that's going to be in every single frame of all 3 of my cameras of shots. Okay. Mm-hmm. So just kind of be proactive in thinking. You be a professional and do your job and do the best that you can do, even if the person that you are working with is not treating you with that same respect. A lot of the times the photographer still doesn't work with the videographer every time. They're used to having free reign, being able to do whatever they want, which is pretty normal. I mean, it's a lot less normal now. Most people do have video, but it's still, a lot of times the photographer is just able to do whatever they want. So unless you make known kind of what's important to you, and if you frame it, hey, this is important to me, what's important to you, that's going to go a long way. And yes, like Nick is saying, if you just have one camera, that's really dangerous. If you just have one microphone, that's really dangerous. I look at it as an insurance policy, a backup plan, just, the oh crap angle, like just having something there to cut to if you need to, or, you might have missed a moment, or you might be moving from one spot to another while the kiss happens, or, there's a lot of different things that go with that. Another thing I wanted to bring up is I see this a lot in wedding films, and I used to do this a lot too, is like, I think most people feel like they need to be fiddling with the camera or touching the camera or fixing something. Oh, the ISO might need to come down a little bit. Oh, I'm going to frame it just a little. For me, what I've been doing so many times in an edit, I'll be like, okay, this looks good, and I'm going to use it. And then all of a sudden I bump the camera, or I move it, or I change the color, or I change, instead of just like getting it locked down, getting it set, and then just leaving it, having it on a tripod and leaving it. Like that it's much easier in post to like bring down the brightness just a little bit. I mean, if you're way overexposed, that's different, but if it's a little too bright or a little too dark, you can usually fix that in post and not have to mess with it a ton. But I think my natural reaction, it's like, oh, the groom's getting ready to do his vows. Let me touch the camera and fix it. And I would like be zooming in and out. And it's like, why am I doing this? Like, why did I touch the camera? It looked just fine.
So that's something that happens a lot is people fiddle with the camera once it's set. It's easier to fix it in post if it's a little underexposed or a little overexposed. Did you do that?
Yes, I have learned. I have learned to do that where once I get it where I need it to be, obviously, I just filmed a Catholic ceremony this past weekend. So there's lots of, kind of getting up and moving around a little bit, with that. So obviously paying attention and recomposing, but, whenever they're there saying their vows, I'm getting my shot and I'm leaving it. I'm not touching it. And I have learned to do that because I wanted to keep messing, with my camera or something, like that. Another thing that you want to be mindful of is, now during a ceremony, my wife and I, we really don't have to communicate. We don't need to talk to each other because we have shot with each other so much and we know our roles. But if you're working with someone that's new that you've never worked with, you need to at least be in eye contact. Maybe, I know a lot of people, if they don't have walkie-talkies, which a lot of people don't, they do like hand signals, what 2 is the couple, 1 is the officiant, 3 is the person at the podium. So then, you can you over there cover 3, like that kind of stuff. Figure something out so that you can communicate with each other and have that game plan ahead of time so that while this important speech is going on, one of you is covering the speech, like the homily, rather than both of you on the couple or, something like that. So some way to communicate, whether that's text, whether that's walkie-talkies or hand signals, make sure that you are communicating with that. Another thing I would like to touch base on is going to be white balance. If you nail white balance, it's your best friend. If you miss white balance, you are going to be really, really frustrated with yourself. And especially if you are doing an outdoor ceremony where there's a bunch of clouds, or you're doing, in a church building that has lots of windows and, clouds are coming in and out. You really should be shooting on Kelvin. And the reason that you should be shooting on Kelvin is if you have it set on auto white balance, if a cloud goes in front of the sun, then your camera is going to auto fix it so that it's trying to make it correct the whole time. So you might have it let's say it's going to start at 5,000, a cloud moves in front of it, then it's going to drop to 4,000, the cloud moves out of the way, then it'll jump back to 5,500, something like that. And so it's going to be really hard for you to color correct. So if you have it consistent on Kelvin, then it will always be the same and it is much easier for you to color correct. If you've never shot Kelvin, an easy way to figure out what your white balance temperature should be, flip your camera over to auto, see what that number is, then flip it to Kelvin and then put it at that number. Okay. Mm-hmm. That way you will be able to get a really good idea, at least very well in the ballpark of what your white balance setting should be. I know that it can be kind of scary and kind of tricky. Another couple of rules of thumb, if you're outside, starting at 5,000 Kelvin, good place to be. If you are inside with no windows, 33 to 3,500 is a good starting spot. Okay. Just throwing those out there. John, what do you have to add about Kelvin white balance?
As you may know, I shot auto for a long time and I never felt like I could get my color right. And that's why, it would just be searching the whole time during ceremonies. What you said about, I always go into a room and I know that I think it's going to be somewhere around this Kelvin, but I'll flip it over to auto, double check. So like my ceremony this last weekend, it was a cloudy day. It was inside, but there's a lot of windows. I landed somewhere around 4,200 Kelvin on all, and we match those with the 4 cameras and leave them there the whole time. So if the light changes during the ceremony, it's easier to edit all of those in post, because if you think about it, camera 2 might be auto changing your camera, set the settings because it sees light a different way, but camera 1 the angle might not need to change. So it's like they're not matching anymore. They're harder to match in post. And so, during a ceremony, if they're going to do sunset or whatever, you may have to manually move it at a certain point. I've seen that. I always try to beforehand with the couple make sure they know not to do the ceremony at sunset. But
sure,
yeah, the Kelvin's really important. Don't let it be overwhelming. Flip it over into auto, and if it doesn't, worst case scenario, if you feel like it looks really bad on your camera and you're not comfortable, just put it back on auto for this one. I mean, you can always, deal with it, but the more that you control your camera, the more the footage is going to look how you want it to look.
Yes.
Lastly, Nick, I think there's only one other thing to really talk about when it comes to ceremonies, is the lighting situation.
Yeah.
Do you want to add anything else about Kelvin first?
No. I'll chat just a second about lighting. I know we've been talking for a
going.
while.
We're almost
today.
almost got our hour.
I think we did. Anyways.
Yeah, I get asked sometimes, like, if I bring in lights for ceremonies. Have you ever brought in lights for ceremonies? And what situations cause you to do that?
Okay.
If so.
I will say 9 out of 10 times, I do not use any lighting for the ceremony. 9 out of 10 times. The handful of times that I have used lighting for the ceremony, they were at a wedding venue, not a church venue. I do not bring your lighting into church venues, even if it's really dark. Most people will not appreciate that or like that. So if it is a church venue, you're going to need to talk to somebody ahead of time. Don't spring it on them, But for the most part, my rule of thumb is church weddings, absolutely not. Make it work. If that means I bump my ISO to 8,000 so it's really grainy, but I'm able to capture it, that's what I do. Okay. If it's really, really dark and it is a wedding venue, I have used lights before. I do have the Practilite 602s, so they're really bright. I can put them up pretty high. I can kind of put them farther away because their throw is really, really long. But I am also communicating with the photographer for that, and I am communicating with the planner if there's a planner about that. Usually that's not something that I'm bringing up with the couple because I know that they would like the best thing that they can get for their ceremony. So I'm not bringing it up with them usually. They're probably not going to know, truthfully. That's just how we operate. But 9 out of 10 times, absolutely not. And then the 1 out of 10th time, it's going to be at a wedding venue, not a church venue. What do you have to add?
There are rules like what you're saying. Don't bring them into the church. That sort of thing. There's always an exception to the rule. Like if it's going to be just terrible and you think that like it's going to help the couple to bring in just a little bit of light at a church, that'd be a really rare situation. Yeah. So I agree with everything you're saying there. The only thing I would add to it is I personally have only lit a few ceremonies if it was like a outdoor sunset is about to happen. Like I just get the lights on just so I know when the sun's going to go down, like the couple's still going to have light on them, that sort of a thing. I was going to point out too that like by just looking at the light in whatever room you're in. So for example, this last weekend I was at a wedding venue and they had overhead lights and windows everywhere. And I was like, do you mind? Like I asked the wedding planner, like, do you mind if we kill some of these overhead lights during the ceremony? And she was like, yeah, which ones do you want off? And like, so she turned off a bunch of lights and it looked like the venue was closed. And I was like, I don't like that as much. So, but like they turned off a lot of them that were going to be on the couple and left the lights on the guests or whatever. So that way window light was hitting them. So just by asking sometimes, if you have a good relationship going, like the lighting, you can just say, hey, could you guys bump the lights a little bit or could you turn them down a little bit? I always felt like that was rude to ask, but then I would be in my edit and be so mad at myself. So if you broach the subject, if you take it lightly and say, hey, is there a way it's a little dark. Is there a way to bring in more light? They might be able to help you with that as well. So, having to push your camera, bumping the ISO, that sort of thing is like a last resort. So if you can just communicate clearly, if you come into it as a team player, and if you're moving into that type of a vibe with the ceremony instead of like, I'm the video guy, I need my stuff, you're going to get a lot further. So
yeah,
that's about it. And I will say, like we mentioned, just kind of earlier, Complete Wedding Videography course is coming soon. More on that later, but this is just a tip of the iceberg of what we talk about inside of the course. We walk through every single portion of a wedding day, our theory, why we do what we do. In our shooting module, it's hours and hours of content just walking through how we do what we do. So if you found this information helpful, that course might be something you want to do. If you do something differently than us, Or if you think, oh, we said something that you don't agree with, let us know in the comments. We would love to kind of talk about this and open up conversation about ceremonies, because we're always looking to get better too.
Yeah, absolutely. And as John mentioned, our Complete Wedding Videography course is going to be dropping. It's going to be on sale in the next few weeks. If you are interested in getting on the email wait list, so that as soon as it becomes available, as soon as there's more information, you will get an email and can be notified about that, head over to CompleteWeddingVideography.com. If you head there, you can sign up to be a part of the wait list. And as soon as it becomes available, you will be notified. So that's CompleteWeddingVideography.com. John, it's been great talking with you. We hope, listener, that you found some information here that was really helpful for your business and filming weddings. And until next time, we will see ya.
See ya.